As December moves right along, we welcome you and say thanks for joining us for another edition of Moral Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel again today. Reverend Daniel Corrie Shull, Burnett Avenue Baptist Church, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, and Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville. A smaller but mightier panel than usual today. Our first topic, 37 states and the District of Columbia have laws permitting marijuana for medical use. For the past 3 years, Kentucky's House voted overwhelmingly to legalize it, but the Senate voted no. Next year, the bill goes back to Frankfurt, where it will start in the Senate, and advocates hope it will pass this time. So turning to our panel on our program, where do you stand, panelists, on medical marijuana?
I think anything that can alleviate pain and is under control, like a prescription, should be used. There are people out there who are hurting and hurting. This will help them. This will help them live better lives, and I do, especially if it's under control by the government, like a prescription. Then why not?
I think I agree that from what I understand about medical, it really has helped a lot of people. I know several people who use it and have found that heavy. I do think there's always a little bit of a challenge for us in a society where there's a lot of drugs out there that are killing people, opioids, for instance, and fentanyl. That worries me a great deal because I had way too many young people's funerals in the last couple of years. So how do you balance all of that? But I do think the benefit outweighs the problem, especially in a controlled medical use of it.
Yeah, I think that marijuana can be a very good thing. It is a revenue source for our state. Having been a huge tobacco producing state and economy, I think that it is only logical and economically responsible to begin to legalize and to have all of the extra necessities to ensure that the marijuana is safe. And that it is produced in a way that does not cause additional harm. And so I am a proponent of not only medical marijuana, but also marijuana for recreational use. And I think Kentucky would do well to begin producing it in our tobacco producing state.
I agree with you, Corrie, entirely. The other states that have recreational marijuana, it seems just it's life, and it has not turned them into either Sodom or Gomorrah. And also, we're a poor state, and the tax revenue that we could develop would be helpful to the entire.
Our question today is basically medical marijuana rather than the legalization of marijuana. I would probably have some more questions to be raised about the legal, only because I'm concerned about tobacco use. I'm heard about things that harm people. So I don't know, but if the focus is medical, yes.
Okay. The question is always about what are people doing and what's happening on the black market. We know that medical marijuana has been a thing for a long time, for decades. Now, we're talking about legalizing medical marijuana. We're way behind the apple cart. So we really need to speed up on that. In the same way, recreational marijuana is all around us. It is easily accessible. In fact, you don't have to just get someone to sell you weed so that you can roll a blunt, but you can have somebody to make you weed brownies or weed lollipops or weed gummies. In fact, I'm very cautious when people bring brownies to functions now, because you can get a hold to brownies that have marijuana in them. And so I think Kentucky needs to catch up. We need to not only legalize it for both medical use and recreational use, but we need to regulate it in a way that ensures the safety of all people, whether they are using it for medical use or recreational.
So that's a follow-up
And
question. I'm worried
the regulation
with misuse or with recreational, as you said. Do you find that, or are you concerned that some consider that a gateway drug, just the start of more?
Well, I think it's a gateway drug. Now my friends, I'm a millennial. All of my friends pretty much smoke marijuana, or they use marijuana gummies, or they eat marijuana brownies. It's very normal in my generation. Is it a gateway drug? Well, I would say so. Just as I believe that beer could be a gateway to alcoholism. But we still sell it legally. We still regulate it. I think the danger is that now we are selling marijuana and other things on the black market. They are being unregulated, and people are dying as a consequence of them. When marijuana is laced with fentanyl, it causes people to die. And so what is the way that you prevent deaths? You regulate it. You legalize it. This is no different than 100 years ago during Prohibition, where there were people who were dying because of some of the moonshine mashes. Some of those mashes were so potent that some people were losing their lives in the aftermath of consuming it. We knew that people were not going to stop consuming moonshine. They were not going to stop consuming bourbon. But what the state could do, and what the federal government could do, is legalize it and then regulate it in a way that prevents those type of casualties from happening. And so I guess it's beside the point, in my opinion, to debate whether or not it's a gateway drug. That I don't do marijuana because I do believe that it is a gateway drug, and I have many people who are close to me who I think have been sucked into the damaging effects of daily marijuana use. But those people I love very much, and even though they find the need to have some form of marijuana daily, I don't want them to get a hold to marijuana that could kill them. And I think that's what we ought to be focused on.
To play a little devil's advocate with you, Corrie, and I actually agree with what you just said, but I think sometimes if people are getting marijuana now illegally, we can set up all the rules and regulations we want to protect them, but they can still get it illegally. So I don't know where that line is.
Well, I think when you regulate it legally, when it is legalized, you have less of an incentive to get it illegally. It's like playing the numbers. You don't have to play the numbers down in the back of a barbecue joint when you can go to the gas station, any gas station in town, and get a legal lottery ticket. You don't have to go and seek someone out who is selling moonshine or bourbon out of their garage or out of their basement, because there are liquor stores all around from which you can purchase those things in a legal and regulated way. I think the same is true for marijuana. I think, yeah, of course, you're going to have people who continue to sell it on the black market because it is not legalized. But once it is legalized, once it is regulated, once businesses begin to open here, just like they are in Colorado and Nevada and California, where people can walk in broad open daylight without fear of, arrest or anything else, well, you're going to put those people on the black market out of business very, very quickly, because, there is no need for them any longer. And so I think we would do well to hurry toward that end in order to begin to curb these casualties caused by fentanyl being laced in these type of products.
And there's another factor too. If it's legalized and regulated, and there are, let's say for the sake of our discussion, that it's not just medical marijuana, it's recreational marijuana as well. You would have to go into a registered purveyor of that to purchase it. And if I would presume that if you go in to purchase it, you would be carded. That would keep the marijuana, presumably, hopefully, out of the hands of kids.
Right. And one thing that we know, and I hope that we can do that, but one thing I know in my role as a board member for Jefferson County Public Schools is that we suspend kids every day for possession of marijuana. Whether it's a gummy, whether it's a blunt, what have you. We suspend kids every day for that. I would like to see us in that policy because the kids are not necessarily high at school. One, they may be found with a blunt, but they're not smoking the blunts in class. And when we suspend them for being caught in possession of marijuana, we then rob them of very critical instructional time. I think we need to begin to end that policy because on a city level, LMPD is no longer arresting people for possession of marijuana. So, I think that our laws need to catch up with the reality of where people are.
Corrie, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If a young person is caught with marijuana on their person at a public school, of course they're punished, they're suspended, expelled, whatever. But are they also placed in some sort of drug education program at the same time?
No, we just suspend them, and they get to come back to school at the end of their suspension.
Okay, one more
wouldn't it make more sense to suspend them, but suspend them to a drug education program?
Well, I think that's a wonderful idea, but with that, we get into personnel issues. We get into a place to actually house that program and then have enough supervision for all of the kids and all of the high schools and middle schools who get caught with that type of thing on them. And so it lends itself to a great idea, but a logistical nightmare. And what I mean by that, you might have, 40 kids a day across the city who are suspended for having, and this is very easy to do. I was walking home with my friends yesterday and I had a bag of gummies and I shared them and then I put the bag in my coat pocket. And the next morning I woke up, put on my coat, ran out to catch the bus, ended up in school some kind of way. There is a search happening this day. My gummies are discovered. I am now suspended. It's a very simple and easy thing to happen. I am less concerned about students with marijuana and more concerned about students and vaping. I'm more concerned about students and laced drugs. Those are the things that are really claiming my attention. And the reason is marijuana, I know I sound like an advocate for marijuana. I'm not exactly an advocate for marijuana, but I've just had too many friends who have earned PhDs, friends who have earned JDs, friends who are running, departments in corporate America, who smoke marijuana regularly, who have gummies regularly. And they are powerful, prosperous, professional human beings who people who don't know that they do those things are very, very proud of and support roundly. So I don't think that participating in recreational marijuana causes people to not be successful. I do think that having laws that cause marijuana to be illegal, which puts people in risk of interfacing with the criminal justice system, that can derail a person's future in ways that a blunt just cannot. And so I guess my challenge would be for us to actually remove the barriers to people's success. Marijuana is not hurting anyone. At the very, when it's not laced with anything, it makes people hungry, or it makes people sleepy, or it makes people calm down, or it eases people's pain, or it's a remedy for glaucoma, whatever. But when it's not regulated, that's when we get into all of these issues with deaths and with lacing and with doing things that cause harm to people.
All right, panel, we'll find out what happens with that bill in the Kentucky legislature in the months ahead. We're about halfway through already our moral side of the news for this week, so here's our second topic. After a fierce political runoff in Georgia, the final election year votes have been tallied. Republicans control the U.S. House of Representatives, and Democrats have kept their hold on the Senate. So turning to you, panel, what are your hopes for the new year in Washington? That's a big question.
I hope that, and I might sound like the ultimate Pollyanna, I don't know, and I don't care. I hope that we begin to see the roots of nonpartisan behavior on Capitol Hill. I am thrilled that Senator Warnock has a full 6-year term now, because what a quality individual representing the people of Georgia. I think that's fantastic. I felt a degree of pity for his opponent, because I just think that poor soul was in above his head, but with the person like Senator Warnock, and also because of the way that the Senate is structured, the Democratic Party is not going to be at the mercy of people either on one end of the spectrum or the other.
Yep.
I
join you. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Corey, go ahead.
No, I was just going to join Rabbi Miles in congratulating and sharing my excitement that the Reverend Dr. Senator Raphael Warnock has been elected for a full 6-year term to the United States Senate, representing the good people of the state of Georgia. I met Dr. Warnock when I was a sophomore student on the campus of Fisk University. Dr. Warnock and my college dean they were classmates at the esteemed Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And so this is a very personal victory, but I think it is a victory also for sanity in our national body politic. I think that the election of people like Dr. Warnock is a resistance against all of the voices in our nation's capital that would promote xenophobia and racism and classism in ways that continue to undermine the nation's best values. And so I'm really optimistic. I'm optimistic because not only did Raphael Warnock win, but I'm optimistic because some of those voices that have been elevated over the past 5 years have begun to rethink their trajectory. They began to rethink their behavior and their words. And I'm grateful that something could cause them to take a moment to be reflective as to how they have injected so much poison into our national politics. I also celebrate the fact that it looks like Donald Trump's star is beginning to wane, that it is beginning to darken, and those who would support him. And so, yeah, I am really optimistic about what will happen in Washington in January.
I would agree with what both of you said. I have great respect for Dr. Warnock. I guess I was a little disappointed that he technically won by 2.5%, when I think it could have been easily 50%. But that's where we are. So it's a very narrow margin, and I think most of the election deniers lost. I think there were only 3 that actually won. That's a positive thing, but we've got a long way to go to overcome the partisanship and the divisiveness and the polarization. I think Warnock is very articulate, and we need some articulate people in the Senate to speak for all kinds of people, like in Georgia. I thought it was also amazing to me that this is a runoff election, so it was only one race, and 1.4 million people voted the day of, and I think there was 7 or 8 million before. That's 3 million people that went out to vote for one race.
Yeah.
That I give a credit to the people of Georgia for doing that, and for the people who were trying to help people to vote when there were so many other restrictions that were being placed upon many people. But people said, nope, I am going to have a say in this. And thank God they did.
Amen.
It's the one thing that we've learned, I think, from as the American people from the last few elections is that voting is a precious privilege that we have, and that we must take advantage of the privilege as citizens to vote. Because if we don't, things can go terribly, terribly, terribly wrong in our society. And we don't want that ever to happen again.
I think another thing about this election, from what I understand, is that there was a lot of people crossing the aisle on several. There were certain Republicans that were elected in Georgia, but there were other Democrats that were elected. That people don't just check off one party, and I think that's very healthy for our country. I never vote one party. I always say, okay, well, let's look at the race and let's see who I think is the better candidate in that particular race. That will do the most good for the community. So
I certainly hope that we see more of that.
Yeah.
I hope that we see more of that, but I am concerned that we're not seeing enough of that. And we're not seeing enough of it because Dr. Warnock won by a very, very, very thin margin. And I don't know how that can be when you really give attention to his opponent, Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, I'm sure, is a swell gentleman, but there was absolutely no evidence that he was competent to serve in the United States Senate. And the fact that at least 1 million people voted for him to serve in that capacity is something that gives me great pause. It causes me to question whether or not many people are, they have the skills of critical thought, or whether they are just committed to party politics and will vote for whoever the party puts up. Also, I'm concerned about what's wrong with Republicans. That Republicans feel that Black people are so stupid that they would fall for a Herschel Walker, that they would not. It is as though there are no Black people who are interested in voting Republican. But do they think that thoughtful people would vote for Herschel Walker? Thoughtful Black people would vote for Herschel Walker? And so it says much about what the Republican Party thinks about Black Americans, which I think is very sad. If the GOP could not find a better candidate than Herschel Walker, they should have, I guess, just not put up any candidate. I don't know. But it says much about their thoughts about Black people.
There's a terrible cynicism.
The other thing is that it might not necessarily be partisanship, but an ideology. Because I think there are different ideologies in even the Republican Party as there is in the Democratic Party. And sometimes people get into an ideology, and that ideology is the only way. Anything else is bad. Yep. So I'm going to vote for somebody who has my ideology, and or at least perceived that way. And I'm not sure that's healthy too.
I agree.
Okay, panel, we have about 2 minutes left in this one of our last shows of the year on Moral Side of the News. I'm going to give you each about 30 seconds about what are you thankful for this holiday season. Who'd like to start?
I'm thankful in this holiday season, and particularly this Christmas season, that God is not classist and that God is not racist. That we who are in the Christian tradition celebrate during this time of the year the birth of Jesus Christ, who was born in a third-rate village in a forgotten corner of the world. And we believe that God used one of the forgotten places to do one of what we consider one of the most special things. And I believe that God continues to do that work in the here and now. And I anticipate seeing more of those activities of God in the coming future. And for that, I am deeply grateful.
I would echo that, but I guess one of the things I'm always happy for at this time of year is family. And what I conclude my Louisville family. In the past year, I've lost quite a few friends to death. So that makes it a little sober. So you're always grateful for the ones you still have with you, as well as those who've gone on to other life.
And Stan, you have about 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I'm thankful for the gift and closeness of family. And I'm also thankful that I believe that the pendulum is swinging a little bit more toward understanding and sanity in our world. And I just hope it keeps going in that direction and doesn't stop.
Great words to end this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you to our panel, Corrie Shull, Rabbi Stan Miles, and Father Joe Graffis. You can catch this program again on YouTube anytime. Just go to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. Until next time, panel, happy holidays, and we'll see you then. So long.